Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Basel Pod. I'm Sam Basel, joined alongside Jordan Laube, and this is episode 4 of our 2025 NFL preseason breakdowns. We've covered 3 divisions so far. You can find all of those wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube, on houseenterprise.com. And if you want to look specifically for your team, you can find a specific team breakdown where we've clipped every single segment of the 3 podcasts we've recorded so far and put those on our YouTube channel. But today we're getting into our 4th division of the season, the AFC North, another very contentious division. It featured 2 playoff teams last year, almost featured 3. But before we get into that, Jordan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Really excited. I have my Mr. Milchick shirt on for my Severance fans at home. Tramel Tillman just got announced he's going to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day, which has me
saw that, yeah.
Yeah, has me even more excited. You know, like Marvel is kind of, it's not fading out, but the hype is not what it used to be. But that cast is looking really, really solid. A mature Tom Holland will be really cool to see and kind of take on, the MCU's take on the Tobey Maguire movies, essentially, because there are rumors he's Norman Osborn, which that would be really cool to see. Him in that role. But but other than that, everything's going well. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. And yeah, honestly, it's been a superhero summer for me as well. I mean, I know, like you said, Marvel's kind of taking a backseat, just to get off into a little comic book side tangent. But Superman was awesome. I've not been able to say that on any House Enterprise thing yet, but probably my movie of the year. I loved Fantastic Four. I thought it was good. Not a lot of people might agree, but whatever. But you can't go wrong with Spider-Man next year. No, so we'll see how that goes. But
absolutely,
we're talking about some teams and some players that are no stranger to some super heroics. And I would like to start off with the reigning division champs, which are very emblematic of that being the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens obviously went 12-5 last year. But as we've seen in years past with this specific incarnation of the Ravens, they came up short once again in the playoffs. Jordan, a lot to look forward to for Baltimore this year, but that division round exit, again, losing to Buffalo, it still hangs over them. For you, I mean, what is the biggest thing from last year that you saw improvement-wise in the playoffs, although it still couldn't get Baltimore over that hump?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between where this team was, we'll kind of give a 3-year window, right? Like 2023, really strong defense. Lamar finally put together his best season since 2019 and probably the best season of his career. Depending on who you talk to, 2024 is his best, but we'll get into that. And just a really solid overall team. Did they get to the AFC Championship that year? I forget. Or did they get eliminated early in
2023?
Yeah, let me see. 2023 NFL play. I want to say they got there, but I might be wrong. They lost to the Chiefs 17-10 in the AFC Championship. They come back. Defense struggles really early on in the season, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. Defense figures it out. Lamar starts playing a lot better. Zay Flowers takes a pretty good second-year leap. The emergence of Isaiah Likely, obviously adding Derrick Henry. So you get all those pieces finally working together. They go on a dominant run from week 11 to week 18. And then Lamar just has his worst game of the season against the Bills, at least in the first half. Second half, he looked much better after they made a couple adjustments. But that first half was probably his roughest half of the season, and arguably over the last 2 years was the roughest half that he had. And, everyone can blame Mark Andrews on, a couple of drops that game in key situations. But if Lamar plays a slightly below average first half, the Ravens win that game. And I'm not saying the game is Lamar Jackson's fault, but it is a factor, right? So
absolutely.
Where does that leave us for 2025? They made improvements to the defense through the draft and free agency and let some guys go. That was kind of addition by subtraction. Offense, they're shoring up a couple of positions, adding some depth at receiver. adding some pieces to the offensive line as they've had some shuffling going around there the past few years. So I think this is the best position they've been in going into a season since Lamar has been at the helm. Now it's just a matter of, can Lamar keep this play up that he's been doing the past 2 years? And I saw a tweet the other day that it's crazy how he has hit the ceiling of Michael Vick and he's still getting better. Like, because I remember all those years ago, we were like, what if with Mike Vick, right? Well, now we're seeing it at the peak that he could have ever been. And Lamar's starting to exceed that. Like, his passing has gone to a completely different level that I didn't think was possible for him. He's still as dangerous of a rusher as ever. And I think the thing that makes him best, and not just from a speed perspective, but from a presence perspective, his pocket mobility is just ridiculously good. And that was the problem he had after the 2019 season, 2020, 2021, and 22. His pocket mobility was like, yeah, he could scramble, but he just didn't have a feel for pressure. Now he has that, and that's why we've seen what we've seen the past 2 years. And you can argue he's QB1. Like, Mahomes is great. He's an all-time talent. Will go down as one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. But the past 2 years of Pat Mahomes versus the past 2 years of Lamar Jackson, Lamar has been better in almost every single way, except Super Bowl wins and playoff wins, which that's team. That's not individual player, as we've talked about multiple times on the show.
Yeah. That's kind of a really good thing that we can hit on right now, because you listed out to me when we were talking about this pre-podcast, a lot of different categories that Lamar has been better than Mahomes in. Obviously though, in a lot of ways, we can get into it when we get into our AFC West preview, but it's not that hard of an argument to make that Patrick Mahomes does have to have a much better team around him, and he also is an elite quarterback. Lamar has ranked ahead of him, but in a lot of stats, but Mahomes is not that far behind, and he's not that far, away in terms of relative to other quarterbacks in this league. So for you, I mean, with talking about the Ravens window, should that be a big concern for a guy like Lamar Jackson? Like, do you think there's conversations that he's had with, just people close to him, maybe his agent or other things like that, where talking about, like, how do I continue to, try and have a great career while I see other guys having just as good of a career as me with, a much better setup, and they're still succeeding and they're getting placed ahead of me, even though I may know or I may think I'm better.
Yeah, I think the thing that's going to be biting at Lamar, especially over the past couple of years, is his playoff performances, right? Yeah. And and people get it misconstrued all the time. If you can't perform in playoffs, you're not a top quarterback. That's not always the case. I think it's just it's a Bush argument, and it's a bad faith argument to kind of diminish QB play and elevate other QBs who aren't as good. And they just say, oh, he's a winner. Like, football is not that black and white, right? Like, it's a very complex, very integrated sport. And I think the thing for Lamar Jackson is he kind of has to take that lens and say, look, I'm doing everything in my power to put this team in a position to win every single week. Now I need to do it in the playoffs. I need to continue elevating this roster, because that's what Pat Mahomes does. This was the worst, and we've talked about it. I've mentioned it 2 or 3 times now throughout this series, but this was the worst roster he ever had. He goes 15-2 until still makes it to the Super Bowl. Like, they get embarrassed, but he still makes it there, right? Like, no other quarterback in the AFC has done that except Joe Burrow, right? Like, no quarterback has carried his team to the Super Bowl in the Mahomes era in the AFC except for Joe Burrow, and then obviously Tom Brady. But Tom Brady has that huge sample size, right? Like, yeah. I don't count him in this generation of QBs. No one does. So with that, Lamar has to, I don't want to say lock in, because that just sounds, basic, but I think he does need to elevate, and not elevate his, I don't want to say IQ either, because, like, he's such a smart football player, but I think situationally he needs to not feel like he needs to put the team on his back, and he will through his play of how he does in the regular season. Because in the regular season, he plays loose. He doesn't take stupid shots downfield. He had, I think, 8 turnover-worthy plays the entire season. That's less than half per game. That means less than half the time, on less than one throw per game, less than half a throw per game, you were putting the ball in danger's way, is what he did last year. Like, that is incredible ball security and protection. And once he got into the playoffs against the Bills, that just went out the window because he was like, well, I got to put our team in a position. So I think if it's reverse psychology. If he just lets his playing ability set the tone and he allows Lamar to be Lamar in the playoffs instead of trying to force plays to make something happen for his team, I think that's how they get to the Super Bowl. Because each hang-up in the playoffs that Lamar has been in, it's been Lamar. That's been the reason that, and again, I don't want to say has been the reason, but has been a factor in them not playing as well as they should be or not winning the way they should be, right? Like, I think that's kind of where it has to be, is that he just needs to play his game and not try to elevate the way other quarterbacks have to elevate their teams, like a Josh Allen, a Joe Burrow, a Pat Mahomes. Lamar does not have to do that, and he shouldn't feel like he has to, you know? And again, like, it's, athletes will say they take it day by day, game by game. They take it like each team they play is different and they play them differently. But at the end of the day, he's going to control what he's in control of. And when he tries to do more than that, that's when we see the shortcomings of Lamar Jackson.
So the last Lamar question I kind of want to talk about is that AFC Championship game, right, in 2023. 17-10 in favor of the Chiefs. Lamar had 272 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. I agree that it's kind of bush league to blame a playoff loss on one player, especially the quarterback. If you and I were in disagreement on that, we would not be doing this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
However, the fact that scoreline and that statistical performance from Lamar happened in the same season he won MVP, it kind of has to hang over your head a little bit, right? Like,
absolutely.
And again, MVP, this is how it should be. This is how it is. It's a regular season award, right? It's how you do in the first, at the time, 16, I think, right? They played 16 games at the time. Or in 17.
I think that was when they flipped to 17.
Yes,
it was like 2022. So, yeah.
Regardless, it's about what you do in the 17 games of the regular season. Playoff performances do not affect MVP, and nor should they. But the MVP does kind of set the tone for how you should, I feel like, how you should perform in a playoff run. So for you, I mean, do you feel like that's still something that Lamar has to get over, either for himself or for the fan base or just, the general population at large? I mean, even, talking 15, 20 years down the line, Hall of Fame voters.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I mean, like, not to speculate, but I would say yes. Like, if it was me in that position, I know I would be like, I'm so good and I know my ability is so great. And yet when crunch time happens, I haven't been able to do it. It's not that he can't do it. He just hasn't done it yet. And he hasn't, besides high school, he hasn't done it at any level in his career. Right. So like, that's going to eat at him if he allows it to. But if he's a true professional, which he is showcased that he is, he's going to say, hey, I don't need to let this eat at me. I just need to focus on 2025, being the best version of Lamar Jackson I can be, and letting guys make plays for me when I need it. Like, if something's not there, not forcing something and just taking a negative play like a sack or throwing the ball away or, trying to get a tight window throw in instead of just hugging it up 40 yards downfield in the air and hoping it comes down, right? Like, there's ways to mitigate bad plays or negative plays without putting in further danger to your offense. And that's what Lamar has done a great job of in the regular season. And then that Bills game was the epitome of the Lamar Jackson that we saw in 2018 towards the end of his rookie year when he was starting to take over and using his legs, but the passing wasn't there, right? Like, that's kind of the Lamar Jackson we saw in that first half of that Bills game. Yes, he rebounded, he put his team in a position and other guys didn't come through. But at the end of the day, if he mitigates those losses and mitigates those bad plays we're looking at a completely different AFC divisional game, and they go and play the Chiefs and probably win because they were literally an inch away from beating them week 1 and having the 1 seed anyways. So, like, football is a game of inches. We say it, and it's cliche, and it sounds like hyperbole, but it's really not. Like, football, it truly, truly is a game of inches. And we see that constantly, and I think that's the best example.
I mean, you saw it week 1 last year against the Chiefs, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Like, it's, that's the hope is Lamar takes that mentality and says, I'll let the margins decide this because I know when push comes to shove, my ability is better than anyone else's on the field.
Yeah. And moving on from Lamar, I wanted to talk about the defense. Looking at the Ravens record from last year, by all means, 12-5 for anybody is great. It was enough to win them the division. It was enough to get them in the playoffs. But when you look at each loss, all of them were very close. I mean, all of them were within 3 to 5 points, with the one exception being Kansas City in week 1, which was a 27-20 loss. So for you, at a certain point, I mean, analyzing all 5 of those losses, what side of the ball did that come down to for Baltimore? It could be a mix of both, or do you feel like one side of the ball kind of really affected these results?
I think it was definitely the defense, and especially this passing defense and the pass rush. Zach Orr had taken over Mike Macdonald's spot as defensive coordinator, and Mike Macdonald is one of the brightest defensive minds in the NFL. So that's already a big shoe to fill. And Zach Orr, for those that don't know his story, he was a former NFL player, had some health issues come up that took him out of the game so early, and he was like starting to develop and become a good player. And so he took a back seat. He stepped away. He moved into coaching. And now he's one of the brightest young defensive minds that we have in the coaching cycle. And he kind of had a gauntlet to run through. Obviously, seeing the Chiefs week 1, saw the Bills later, but made really good show out of them. The Bengals twice early on, and we know how high-powered that offense is. So when you put all that together and just some of the shortcomings this defense had in the secondary, the Ravens were the 6th worst in EPA per play allowed and the 3rd worst in EPA per dropback allowed from weeks 1 to 10. Like night and day from last year, where this was in 2023 was one of the best defenses during every phase of the game. Now they're horrible on pass defense when they have studs all over. They have Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins as a rookie was pretty solid. At the time going into the season, Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson were looking like a solid safety tandem. But obviously as the season went on, they were incredibly bad. And they had to make a change. So week 11, they put Marlon Humphrey at nickel and take him away from the outside corner spot. They bump Kyle Hamilton back off the ball, and they bring in 5'8" TCU alum Ardarius Washington. And that's when everything changed. And from week 11 on until the divisional round, they went from being a bottom feeder in the NFL on defense to 1st in EPA per play allowed, 1st in EPA per dropback allowed, 14th in EPA per rush allowed, and they were the only team with a sub 40 success rate allowed overall against the pass and against the run, night and day. And it was literally just putting in someone new, taking 2 guys out, and rotating 2 or 3 guys into new spots. And the whole geography of this defense changed. And different attack angles and being able to do different things. Because Kyle Hamilton is an awesome nickel, but when you don't have the secondary to help you out in the back end, it doesn't matter how well he's doing in coverage or how much of a zone he's taking away. They're going to fit it over the top of him into safeties who aren't doing well. So let's take our oversized 6'3" or 6'4", 220-pound safety, put him in the back end and say, okay, now you can't get over the top of me. And if you throw short, he's going to come down and crack you. And that's if you can get open against Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins. They brought in Tre'Davious White towards the end of last year, and he kind of played a little bit well. Now they have Jair Alexander, who, I think it's a good fit because he's not going to be on the field all the time. But if he gets hurt, kind of a waste, which has kind of been the theme of his career at this point. And now in the draft, they go get Malachi Starks. They get Mike Green, which is controversial, but man, he has so much juice as a pass rusher. The edge rotation is so deep between him, Kyle Van Noy, Odafe Owe, David Ajobo, Tavares Robinson, and I'm sure there's Adisa Isaac, who I loved in last class. It is a deep, deep, deep edge unit, a deep defensive interior, and now you have a loaded secondary. They are going to miss Ardarius Washington for most of the season with an Achilles injury, so that's going to be brutal. But I think Malachi Starks can slot in pretty nicely for him at the free safety spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into your dark horse coming out of the offensive backfield. Keaton Mitchell.
Yes,
obviously,
sir.
He had a great start to 2023, tore his ACL, has kind of been recovering. At what point in his recovery from this ACL tear do you feel like he's at? How, I guess, just in terms of, percentage of his ability from the ACL since before the ACL tear that you think he's at, and how far do you think he can get by the end of the season?
I mean, no one's ever, unless you're Adrian Peterson, who's an Iron Man, no one's ever truly 100% after an ACL. But I think Keaton Mitchell is really close to being back to 100%. Just to get into some of his numbers, 2023 before he tears his ACL, 8.43 yards per carry, which is stupid. And people think he's just a speed back and that's it. He's got some juice in his legs. He had 5.68 yards per contact yards after contact per carry, which is, there's some running backs who don't even get close to 5.6 yards per carry. So after contact, one of the best running backs in the league. And he had 12 carries at 10 plus yards. And then in games where he had 9 attempts or more, he averaged 9.14 yards per carry and 6.44 yards after contact per carry. That's just stupid efficiency. Now, he's not going to take snaps away from Derrick Henry. That's obviously put. But I think just from a speed perspective, a power running perspective, he provides more juice than Justice Hill, who Justice Hill is a very good spellback. I'm not taking that away from him. But if you're looking at the long-term life of this offense year over year, I think Keaton provides a little more juice. And I think we saw that in that first preseason game against the Colts. He's bouncing off guys. He's bouncing off defensive linemen trying to tackle him. And these are not starting defensive linemen, but guys who are going to play regular season snaps at a pretty decent clip. And he's making them look silly. And he had a nice long run in there for a touchdown. I want to say it was for 36, 37, maybe even more yards than that. But he looks really, really good. He's a dark horse for me because I think he's going to play more than people expect. And I think he's going to meet or exceed those absolutely insane 2023 numbers because he is so different than Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry has great breakaway speed, but I think Keaton has better burst. He can keep that speed going longer. And he has the ability to make a guy miss in space and break a tackle or two on his way to the end zone on those big runs that we've seen him do for, the past couple of years.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously it's football, so contact's part of the sport. But after coming off an injury like an ACL tear, you kind of want to, ease yourself back into it, right, physicality-wise. And for what you've described with his stats before the ACL tear, a big part of his game is continuing to get yardage after making contact with defensive players. So obviously coming back from an injury like that, you'd expect those specific numbers to go down. But based on what you've seen, like you described in the preseason games, were you surprised at how well he was and how quickly he was ready to get into some of these, more physical, scrappy plays to get yards after contact?
I would say absolutely. And I think the bigger reason is not so much his recovery, but something that the coaches were saying and what John Harbaugh was saying to the media, that he was competing for RB3 snaps. And that's when I first questioned. I was like, is he really back? Has he really recovered well? Because this is a guy who is one of the most efficient runners in the NFL. Granted, it's a small sample size, but, super explosive player, as we've seen in the stats and as we've seen on tape. So that kind of surprised me that he was struggling to win RB3 reps. And then we saw that preseason game and now it's completely different. Okay, now he might be competing for RB2 and take that over halfway through the year once he is feeling 100% confident again. But I think that Colts game, that preseason game, like I know people shouldn't put a lot of stock in the preseason, but I think in a situation like this, seeing how someone progressed after an injury, and it's the first time you're hitting someone in pads across from you in a game environment, like that just speaks volumes to who Keaton Mitchell is as a football player and as a person, that he can just put the shoulder pads down, get low and physical, and say, I don't care about this injury and what I went through. I'm going to play with no fear and just give it my best shot because I want to make this roster. And I don't want to be a fringe roster player. I would be a contributor. And that's exactly what I think is going to happen based on that performance and knowing who he was in 2023 before that injury.
Yeah. And one more guy I want to ask you about is on the offense is Zay Flowers. Mm-hmm. Last year, he took a big jump in yardage, took a slight jump in targets, but actually was able to get more total yards off of 3 less receptions. He had, his rookie season, he had 858 yards off of 77 catches, and this year he had 1,059 yards off of 74 catches. Mm-hmm. What else do you want to see in terms of progression for Zay Flowers?
I want to see him become more consistent and not so much relying on the offensive scheme to get him open. He is such a fluid route runner, and he's a physical player for his size. But I think now the next step is the savviness to manipulate zone coverages and find the soft spot in the zones and trust his athletic ability to make plays rather than just like Lamar Jackson, don't play outside of your means. Play within yourself. Like Zay Flowers is compact. He's quick. He's elusive, and when the ball is in his hands, he will make anyone miss that's coming at him full speed or even, trying to break down to make a tackle, because he does have that suddenness that I loved when I was scouting him. I think I had him as my 6th or 7th overall prospect in that class, which at the time people were saying was insanely high. We're starting to see that he's starting to meet that high expectation I had of him, right? And that's kind of what I need to see next is like he's not an X receiver. He is very much a Z style off ball guy. Use that to your advantage. You have those extra 2 steps to get your speed going. Leverage that well against zone coverage, and that's going to open up his game because we know he's great against man coverage. But now that zone piece is what he's going to have to find, and I think that's how he takes that next step into a true breakout year where we might see an 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 yard season, right? And I think that as long as he takes that next step, man, the potential is through the roof for this kid. I love him.
Yeah, and in terms of, creative route running, who's a more established wide receiver in this league right now that you feel like you'd like to see Zay Flowers kind of mold his creativity after, if he could, make some improvements in that area?
The first guy that comes to mind is Monroe St. Brown, because they play very similar roles, or at least did coming into this year. I don't know. We'll talk about in the NFC North episode. Or no, we did already talk about. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to use Monroe, if he's going to be as heavy as a slot or a condensed package guy. But I think Monroe does a really good job of, like I said, manipulating zone defense because he's not as athletic as Zay Flowers. He doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the suddenness, but what he does have is strong hands, a compact frame, and an ability to make guys miss in a phone booth, right? And it's not that Zay doesn't have that, but I think he's trying to go so fast that he loses some of that ability because the game hasn't slowed down for him as much as it has for Monroe, right? So if he can get more reps, the game is going to start to slow down for him. That's when we're going to see him break through. And I think route pacing and manipulating zone drops is going to be the next step for him. And that's something Monroe does better than any other receiver in the NFL.
Absolutely. And then the final question for the Ravens, we kind of hit it in the beginning when we talked about Lamar in depth, but what, if you haven't brought it up already, what is something that Lamar or the rest of this Ravens team can do if he has a great game in the playoffs? What is something the Ravens can do to just finally get over this hump and get to the Super Bowl?
Don't break tendency, because that's a big thing teams want to do in the playoffs because they want to be unpredictable. This team is so good that you don't have to do that. And will teams score a little bit more on you, and will they stop you a little bit more than normal if you don't break tendency when you get into the playoffs? Absolutely. With that, I feel like the Ravens try to go so contrarian to what they've been doing that it hurts them because they're not used to playing in those positions and they're not used to playing in a uncomfortable situation. Like, do what's comfortable until you can't do it anymore, right? Like, they were able to do it, and they showed it in the second half. They stopped playing games. They said, we're going to let Lamar be Lamar. We're going to run a more condensed offense. We're going to keep shit short for a little bit until we can take the top off you. And that offense looked completely different. And the defense held up their end of the bargain for, a good chunk of that game. So I think that's what they have to do is stick to the basics, stick to your fundamentals, and don't break tendency until you have to.
And if I could ask one more question,
go for it.
Going into it, obviously we're breaking down the Ravens, but talking about playoff windows, obviously a team's ability to get to the Super Bowl is just as dependent on the quality of their competition as it is on the quality of their own team. For you, one thing that we've kind of highlighted, especially like last year, we've talked about how this was probably out of the 5 teams that Patrick Mahomes took to the Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Like, this one might have been one of the weakest, if not the weakest. So, and that's probably going to continue, right? Like, Travis Kelce's getting older. So for you, how open is Baltimore's window in the AFC compared to other teams, other seasons?
I think it's open more than every other team except the Chiefs. And I think the Chiefs have done a good job of backloading their depth and putting guys, in the right positions depending on their skill set, right? And I think the Ravens also do a really good job of that, as we've seen with, like Ardarius Washington was he was looking like a practice squad player, comes out and ends up playing as one of the better safeties in the NFL in the back half of last year, right? So I think their window is more open than the rest of the AFC teams and not as open as the Chiefs window, right? And I think a lot of that is, Eric DaCosta has done an awesome job with manipulating the salary cap and getting really good team-friendly deals from veteran players and signing players early that are starting to break out. So he gets ahead of these massive jumps in salary. Like, we'll talk about in the AFC South episode, but Nico Collins' contract is such a damn bargain. And he's, in my opinion, a top 5 receiver in the NFL. And I think right now he's 17th in salary. And that's because the Texans paid him 2 years ahead of when the wide receiver market burst open, right? Or a year ahead before it burst open, right? And at the time, everyone's like, oh, that might be a little bit of an overpay. But no one's questioning it now, and now it's a bargain deal. And that's what the Ravens do at pretty much every position, right? So I think that's, as long as they continue to develop this offensive line, keep the defense loaded and deep, and give Lamar Jackson a weapon or two every year that he can kind of play with and will help diversify the offense year over year, that window is going to be open as long as Lamar Jackson is playing at a relatively high level.
Absolutely. And let's get into Baltimore's one of their biggest rivals. I mean, this is definitely one of the more contentious divisions in the NFL, in my opinion. But let's get into probably their biggest rival over the last couple of years, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
Big move for the Pittsburgh Steelers this summer. Aaron Rodgers taking him on June 6th. That was after it was well known that Rodgers would be leaving the Jets. They made the announcement in mid-February, the Jets, that they'd be parting ways with Rodgers after 2 seasons. As soon as the 2025 NFL calendar started, they let Rodgers go on March 12th, and then it was about 3 months before he joined the Steelers. Obviously, he's been in this league for a long time. Already got a Super Bowl with the Packers. The tenure with the Jets did not go the way that anyone wanted it to go. And it kind of feels like he still wants to prove something in the NFL with the Steelers. So team number 3 for Rodgers, it kind of feels like maybe it's the last ride, but we don't know. For you, what do you feel like Aaron Rodgers might still have left to prove in this league?
I don't think he really does. He's won 4 MVPs. He's got a Super Bowl win under his belt. He's one of the winningest quarterbacks of all time, one of the most efficient of all time. I think he just wants to prove that 2010, 2011 wasn't a fluke and that he is still, like, we all know he's a great quarterback. We all know that he's got like, not that he has it anymore, but his ability to manipulate defenses with his eyes, make sound decision making, and just be a good quarterback and do it at a highly efficient level. Like, that's who Aaron Rodgers is and was until a couple of years ago whenever he signed with the Jets, right? Like, we haven't seen the same Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think we're going to at this point. It's his last season. You know, he's still kind of he looks like he's hobbling around, which I know he's not injured, but like he's 41, right? He's much on the older side, and he just doesn't have juice in his arm anymore. Like, he's a fine quarterback to be a bridge quarterback for next year. Maybe the Steelers' long-term plan is to develop Will Howard, who is just a massive human for a quarterback. And kind of like, not that he reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger in his play, but it's just the size of the other quarterbacks in the league. He's in the upper echelon of that. I think he's there to kind of help him develop and take a back seat, because there were some Steelers players who were very vocal, like, look, if he's going to come here, he needs to put his bullshit aside and he needs to go to work and just come here and be a veteran and not make it about him. And Cam Hayward specifically called him out. And since he's joined the Steelers, I've not heard a peep about Aaron Rodgers, like, you know, doing anything outlandish. And not that anything he did with the Jets was outlandish, but it definitely seemed like it was about him and his arrival and how he was going to restore and revive the Jets when he got there, rather than making it about the team and how he's going to guide these young players and push them forward. That kind of seems that's what's happening in Pittsburgh, is that he's pushing this team forward with the young guys, with the young group, and he's staying out of the limelight. You know, obviously he's going to go on the Pat McAfee show as he always does, but like, you know, halfway through last year when Devontae Adams is like creeping in the background of his webcam, and this is like their big announcement, like we know what's happening, but they're still playing it like, oh, will they, won't they? Like, we haven't seen any of that or anything close to that since he's been in Pittsburgh. But in terms of playing ability, I think he's dropped off a cliff in terms of where he was even 2 or 3 years ago. You know, from at the end of last season, from week 11 to week 17, you know, he was a bottom 10 quarterback, you know, out of the 29 quarterbacks that had 150 dropbacks, like from every statistical category you can look at. And even on tape, he didn't look like Aaron Rodgers anymore. You know, beginning of the season, middle of the season looked pretty good, but that last third to, you know, quarter just did not look anything like we've seen Aaron Rodgers before. So I think if the Steelers don't put the ball in his hands more than 60% of the time, and they lean on a running back committee and just run a true West Coast style offense, I think they'll be good. And I think Aaron Rodgers will have a good finish to his career. I don't know if a Super Bowl is going to happen for them this year, just with how loaded the AFC is, but I think he just wants to go out on a better note than his tenure with the Jets, because I think what happened with the Jets has left a bad taste in everyone's mouth around the NFL, not just Jets fans.
Yeah, and if I could speak as a Jets fan for a second, I mean,
yeah,
to give Rodgers some credit, last year the Jets looked rough, but you look at his individual statistics. I mean, the big thing that stand out for me in terms of regression are his yards per attempt. This was his lowest. 2024 was his lowest yards per attempt in 10 years, obviously not counting 2023, at 6.7. But he was just 103 yards shy of 4,000. You know, he moved okay. Obviously not the way he did 10 years ago, but that's not, you don't really expect a guy like that to move the way he did, anyone to move the way they did 10 years ago. For me, the real test is while Aaron Rodgers was playing in 2024 with the Jets, obviously, you know, there was, like you said, the appearances on the Pat McAfee show, all the, you know, conspiracy theory stuff, like all that kind of stuff that, you know, some people were hot on it, some people were cold on it. For me, it was really hard to figure out where the problems with this team started with Aaron Rodgers and where they started with the Jets, right? Because, I mean, you know, talking on Aaron Rodgers' side, obviously, like you said, kind of making it about him a little bit. A lot of the media attention that he got, you know, being in the New York market, it's pretty natural, but he obviously reveled in it a little bit, you know, all the Pat McAfee show appearances. And then on the field, obviously, you know, bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, that was obviously a big push from Aaron Rodgers, and that obviously that did not really work out the way it was intended to at all. But like we've said in the AFC East podcast, like he also had to contend with just the general Jets disorganization that went along with it. So I feel like for this year in the Steelers, obviously they're not a program that has excelled in recent years, but they're a program that has always kind of stayed just above the waterline. Obviously, you've got that streak of Mike Tomlin's, winning seasons. He's gone so long without, a losing season. But I think this is the real test to figure out like how much, what the ratio was between the Jets and Aaron Rodgers in terms of just overall disorganization and, kind of laughably bad football.
Yeah.
But I want to move away from Aaron Rodgers and the offense and get into the defense. You've talked about how deep this defense could be. So for you, what are the big things on this defensive unit that you feel like could give Aaron Rodgers and company the most cushion when they've got the ball?
I think it's just controlling possessions and controlling the clock and letting Aaron be on the field, for 35 minutes plus a game, which is a very lofty number. You don't see that a lot. But if they can allow this offense to be on the field often and just churn drives out and let this defense stay fresh so this way they can get after the opposing offense and get the ball back in his hands, I think that's best case scenario. I mean, you obviously have the big names like TJ Watt. They traded for Jalen Ramsey, which I think was a fantastic trade for the Steelers. I think he's going to, in their base defense, he's going to play strong safety and come down in the box. And then in nickel, he'll be the nickel. Like he's a perfect fit in this defense. Cause he might not be as athletic as he used to be, but he's still one of the best run defending corners in the league. He's one of the best man corners in the league. He's got that veteran savviness now that he didn't really have early on in his career, where he would just kind of take shots and would risk losing leverage to make a big play. Like he doesn't do that anymore. Like Jalen Ramsey is a very, very sound corner, even in his old age. He's probably got another 5 years in the league, if not more. Then they bring in Darius Slay. They have Joey Porter Jr. On the defensive front, they have Keanu Benton, who's really solid and developing. Cam Hayward is a savvy veteran. They drafted Derek Harmon, who's just a fucking freak from Oregon. Like a man his size should not move the way he does. And I need to show you some film on him because he is just disgusting. He was a top 15 player for me in this past class, almost top 10, just nuts. And then you look at the linebackers. They have Peyton Wilson, who's pretty solid. They lost Landon Roberts, but they bring in Cole Holcomb. There's good guys on this defense all around. And those are just, I can't forget to mention Alex Highsmith, who's a really good edge too, opposite TJ Watt. And that's not even getting into their depth. They have Nick Herbig, who's one of the best designated pass rushers in the league. Jack Sawyer, who they just drafted in the 4th round, gonna be their edge 4 and spell run defender. If TJ and Highsmith need a breather, he's going out there, Yaya Black, DT out of Iowa, gonna fill in really nicely as a depth piece on the D line. As we move further back, Malik Harrison and Cole Holcomb they bring in for free agency. Malik Harrison's probably going to be more of that, zone cover guy. Holcomb's going to be that run defending guy. Corey Trice, Beanie Bishop, Brendan Eccles, all at the corner position, all have good playing experience and are solid. Chuck Clark, before I believe it was Achilles tear, it might have been ACL, was a pretty solid safety for Baltimore. And then Sebastian Castro, safety / nickel. If Jalen Ramsey goes down and they don't trust Corey Trice or Beanie Bishop to go in the slot, you could put this guy in because he was a really good slot corner at Iowa. He was one of the better ones that I scouted at least, but not starter NFL material. But if you need him to fill in for a few games and you want to put Jalen Ramsey at the outside because let's say Darius Slay takes a step back or Joey Porter is being too aggressive and you don't want to draw a stupid PI penalty like he usually does, once a couple of games, you can do that. You can shift guys around. This defense is multiple. It's deep. It's got veterans. It's got young guys, and it's got role players in the right spot. This is – I can't remember the last time I was this excited for a defense, and the Steelers have been like this for years. Now they're loaded at every spot, at least 3 or 4 guys deep on the depth chart. I've never seen a defense this complete, at least going into a season. We'll see how it goes throughout the year, but I love what they've done in that room over the past 3 years, especially.
Absolutely. And taking a look at the Steelers' schedule, maybe just looking within like the first, let's say the first 4 games, because they have a bye week 5. They start the season off in New York at the Jets. They host the Seahawks. They head to New England to play the Patriots, and then they actually head to Dublin to take on the Minnesota Vikings. So for you, anything in these first 4 matchups from the defensive side of the ball that you feel like could be a good signifier for how this team will do on the defensively? Maybe specifically how they handle a guy like Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs, like any matchups that you feel like could be key in getting an idea of what their identity is defensively.
I think the biggest thing week 1 is going to be feeling out and seeing how the Jets do with their run game, because they have Justin Fields, who's a dynamic runner. They have Breece Hall, who's also dynamic. Braylon Allen's their bruiser, and Isaiah Davis is their spellback. Like, that's a 4-headed rushing attack, and they're going to use all 4 guys. I wouldn't be shocked if, all 4 of them had 7+ carries that first game, right? Like, is really their only passing threat is Garrett Wilson. Josh Reynolds is a solid option. We talked about this in the AFC East episode, but they're going to have to defend the run and defend it at a high level, and that's going to set them up against the Seahawks, who are going to lean much more run-heavy with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet and more of an outside zone style scheme. And so you're going to play 2 heavy run teams, but 2 different running styles, where the Jets are going to want to stay in between the tackles, except for when Breece Hall breaks one to the outside, which he inevitably always does and gets a big gain. And then you're going to go against the Seahawks, who are going to want to stretch you laterally and find spaces in between, right? So you're going against 2 run-heavy offenses. Then you're going to play New England, who's going to want to use Drake May, leverage a relatively deep receiving room, has still a good rushing attack, and see what happens there. And then that's going to ramp up into the Vikings, where they're going to be pass-heavy. They want to unleash J.J. McCarthy, and I'm telling you right now, if you still have fantasy drafts going on, take J.J. McCarthy with your last pick or one of your last picks, because it's going to be damn well worth it for you in the long term, especially if you're in Dynasty. Like, just go get him. If he's available somewhere in Dynasty. He's probably not, but go make a trade for the kid. And then, so just how the schedule evolves and how different each defense is going to be. I think it's not the matchups, it's how differently they're going to have to prepare for each team. And if they end up 4-0 and they allow, let's say, less than 18 points per game in this stretch, like, that's going to put them in a really good window, because then you go play the Browns, who had a really bad offense last year. Then you play the Bengals, who are obviously really good. But then you play the Packers, who do well in the short game but don't really have a deep threat. The Colts and Daniel Jones, which we'll talk about how pissed I am at the Colts. And then you have a really good run at the end of the year against some really high-powered offenses, right? So if you can go 3-1 and maybe even 4-0 this stretch, and the defense's main reason for that, I think that's going to open up the world of possibilities for this offense to kind of say, hey, the defense has stepped up while we figure our shit out, and after the bye week, we're hitting the ground running. But if they drop, like, let's say I think they're going to lose to the Vikings, because the Vikings are just ridiculous this year coming into this year. But I think they could also drop one to the Pats or the Seahawks. If they don't win one of those 2 games, that's when I'm going to kind of be skeptical, because it's all these offenses are different and you have answers for all of them. What are you doing to help prepare and keep this defense steady so this way the offense can let themselves work and get recuperated? Because like you said earlier, Aaron Rodgers arrived in May. And yes, he's a veteran, but losing February, March, April, and a good chunk of May to be in the facility, meet the guys, get some throws in with your new pass catchers, like, that's kind of tough.
Absolutely. And going back onto the offensive side, I want to talk your dark horse, Jaylen Warren. Kind of like Keaton Mitchell, a running back who had a solid 2023, got hurt. Obviously did not meet the same statistical margins that he did in 2024 that he did in 2023. But for you, where could he come back and make a huge splash in this offense?
I think just doing what he did as a receiving back in 2023 is going to be important, while keeping that efficient rushing up to par, right? So In 2023, there were 41 running backs with 125 carries. These are his ranks in multiple key categories for rushing. He was 7th in rush grade and 11th in offensive grade. So it's top quarter in both and top 20% for rush grade. He was 2nd in yards per attempt and 2nd in yards per attempt after contact. Really solid. 7th in missed tackles forced per carry. He was tied 10th in carries of 10 plus yards. So we're looking at a top 10 running back from 2023, and he had a good volume of carries. Then we go to the receiving side. He was 5th in receiving grade, 5th in yards per route run, 13th in total yards. And here's the kicker. He was tied for the 5th lowest average depth of target at negative 0.18 yards. He was getting targeted almost 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage on average, and he was still top 15 in receiving yards. Like, that just shows his yak ability. He was tied 20th in yak per reception, but I think that kind of is – that doesn't really make sense with the ADOT and how many yards he was getting after that. Like, if he's targeted a little further downfield, he's probably pushing top 8 for yards, right? Like, he does a really good job of making guys miss in a phone booth, like I said earlier, and he's got more oomph in him than Keenan Mitchell has, right? And this may be a committee backfield. You know, they drafted Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, who, if he has an open crease, he's better at exploiting it than anyone else in this class, and really not anyone else in the league, but, you know, I would put him up there with some pretty significant running backs in terms of, if the window's there, he's breaking away and getting 20 yards on almost every time that's open. But the thing is, with this offensive line, I don't know if that's going to be there nearly as often as it was at Iowa. And I think for that reason, Jaylen Warren is better at making spaces happen when they aren't there, versus Caleb Johnson needs the space there to make something happen. So I think, you know, Jaylen Warren, at least this year, will get the bulk of the carries. You know, it may not be like 200 to 100. I think it'll be like 150 to like 130, you know, but those 20 carries are going to make all the difference for this offense. And I think I love Jaylen Warren. Like, he's the type of football player I would want in my locker room, like kind of like Austin Eckler when he was coming back on the scene, you know, in like 2017, 2018, that time frame. Like, Jaylen Warren is of that archetype for a running back.
Yeah, and like you said, for a running back who is specifically a receiving back who is really good at getting the ball behind the line of scrimmage and then taking it further, right? I mean, that's almost like a perfect pairing for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, right? Who, like we said, is his yards per attempt is one of the lowest it's been in his whole career. So that's kind of almost exactly the kind of guy you want in the backfield with an aging quarterback like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like, the problem is that like, there's not a whole lot of other receiving threats on this team. Like, DK Metcalf is not what he was in 2020. He is not developed into the route runner that it looked like he was going to become early in his career. And then you got Calvin Austin, Robert Woods, Roman Wilson, like all like kind of teetering wide receiver 3s who are going to get thrown in a wide receiver 2 role. And then Pat Freiermuth, possession guy, Jonnu Smith, who was great in Miami last year, is like, Arthur Smith likes him, but he doesn't like using him often. Like, he'll use him, you know, but he's not going to get as many targets as he did with Miami. And you have Darnell Washington, who's just a big freak who could probably play offensive tackle for this team, but he's, unfortunately, they want to play him at tight end for whatever reason, even though they need a tackle, right? Like, there's a reality Jaylen Warren is second in targets on this team. Like, I'm just putting it flat out there. Like, with what you said, with the low yards per attempt, the low ADOT, guys not being able to get open, like, Aaron Rodgers might be checking it down a lot, and they might be splitting Jaylen Warren out wider in the slot and saying, hey, just get open on a linebacker or a safety, and we'll just put it on your chest and let you work, right? Like, it's a reality, like, it's a small reality that happens, but if he did finish second in targets, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've said, it's been a long time since the Steelers have had a losing season. But also, if you look at the last 25 years of Steelers drafting, it's also not very often that they have a top 10 draft pick. Their last pick in the top 10 was in 2019 with Devin Bush. He was picked 10th. But since then, you got to go all the way back to the year 2000 when they drafted Plaxico Burress at 8th overall. People talk about Mike Tomlin and his coaching record and how, you know, it's been a very long time. before the Steelers have had a losing season. At a certain point, though, you kind of hit this really hard plateau, right?
Yeah.
So obviously no one wants to have a losing season. No one wants to be in tank mode. But for you, if the Steelers, they go 10-7 again, and then they pop out in the division round again, like for you, what is the mindset for the Steelers front offense?
You got to blow it all up. Like Mike Tomlin is Mike Tomlin. I would say after this year, like Aaron Rodgers is going to be on his way out. Like he said, this is most likely his last season. Cam Hayward's going to be on his way out. TJ Watt just got a ridiculous contract coming off the worst season of his career. Like he's still a good defender, but he's not what he was even last year or 2 years ago. Excuse me. You just brought in all this talent to try to make one last push. If it doesn't work out, like don't try to save yourself like the Saints have been doing for the past 6-7 years, right? Like you got to blow it all up, I think. And I think that starts with restructuring contracts, trading away key pieces that aren't on super lucrative deals. And you just bite the bullet. You eat contracts like TJ Watts, Alex Highsmith, who I love Highsmith, but if they're blowing it all up, there's really no reason for him to stay in Pittsburgh other than the bag, right? Like, you just got to completely rebuild and just say, hey, like, let's try Will Howard out. Like, this is a national championship winning quarterback. Let's just see what happens. Like, he's going to learn under Aaron for a year, see what he has for a year or two. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll get a quarterback in 2027 or 2028. Like, we'll figure it out. But, like, if you don't make playoffs and you've gone year over year bringing in savvy veterans and overpaying players and blowing up roster spots that don't need to be blown up. Like, they had Deontay Johnson and George Pickens 2 years ago. And I know Deontay is who Deontay is now, but, like, you could have made that work. They were two perfectly differing skill sets. And I know Deontay had the drops issues. He's had some behavioral stuff. But if Mike Tomlin's good at anything, it's reeling in receivers and turning them into really good players. Like, they could have made something work without trying to make all these elaborate moves and try to make, hey, our Super Bowl window's this tight, we have to push for it. Like, you could have expanded it. And I would feel a lot better where the Steelers are right now if they tried that. And they really didn't. Like, they just kind of said, oh, we'll just change this and then we're right back. Like, yeah, but the AFC is so friggin' deep. You can't just put a Band-Aid on things and expect them to work out. Like, NFC, you might get away with it because the talent is not nearly the same as it is in the AFC right now. But that's just how it is. I think you got to fire Tomlin and just start from scratch if you don't make the playoffs this year. And even if you do make the playoffs, if you don't get past the wild card round, I think you still consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. So potentially some very tough questions for Steelers fans and the front office come February.
Yeah.
Let's move into a team that, they've got some playoff experience. They've got some playoff experience early with guys like Joe Burrow, obviously going to the Super Bowl a couple years back, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of talking about how the Steelers, they kind of coast at this 10-7 every year, 10-6, 9-8. The Bengals finished 9-8 last year and were a game out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, finishing 9-8 almost and missing the playoffs almost feels worse than finishing like 6-11, right? Because it gets you so close, and especially in a league where you can finish 9-8 and miss the playoffs, but then someone else in another division could finish 8-9 and make the playoffs as a division champ, right? Like it's incredibly frustrating to have a winning record and not come away with the playoff run out of that. So for you, where do you feel like the Chiefs were, maybe just a couple – sorry, not the Chiefs. Where do you feel like the Bengals were just a couple inches away from the playoffs last year?
I don't think they're a couple of inches away. I think they're a couple yards and a couple miles away when it comes to this defense. And in the notes, I put, holy hell, this offense is going to be so good.
Yeah.
And the notes were, holy hell, this defense is going to be so bad, right? Like, this defense is the Achilles heel of this team and pretty much has been since Joe Burrow's been in the league, right? And And we'll start with the offense. Like, over the course of the entire year, they were 7th in EPA per play, 6th in EPA per dropback, and 19th EPA per rush. And then weeks 1 through 8, overall, they were good. Pass offense was good. EPA per rush was bad. They were bottom 8 in the league. They were 7th worst. And then from week 9 to week 18, they improved to 11th best in the run game and moved up to 5th overall as an offense. So offensively, they even transformed midway through the year. A lot of that kind of has to do with Chase Brown. Like, if you look at his efficiency numbers as a rusher and as a receiver, they aren't great, but it's the 1 + 1 is 3 effect. He's good enough at rushing and good enough at receiving that you get a great running back in how this offense is used. And they're going to leverage him coming into this year, right? Like, this offense just opened up and they used him more. And the stats don't explain it because he was technically less efficient as a rusher and slightly more efficient as a receiver. But the matchups they got with him out of the backfield compared to what they had with Zach Moss, just linebackers had to creep down much faster than they were, which opened spaces behind them for Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Mike Gesicki came alive in the second half of the season. Like, he really opened up this offense in a way this offense hasn't been open from a running back since Joe Mixon was there, right? I know Joe Mixon's only a year removed, but even the last season Joe Mixon was with the Bengals was not a good year for him, right, in terms of his career. But the biggest thing I want to point out is points per game. They, from weeks 1 through 8, they were 24.83 points per game scored. From weeks 9 to 17, they were 32.25 points per game scored. Like, they went up over a touchdown's worth and an extra point's worth, almost 2-point plays worth when they put in Chase Brown. And, like, he's not the end-all be-all, but he was a huge factor in that offense opening up. You know, like, that's what makes Chase Brown good, is how much he opens up this offense and allows the offense to operate in a way that they haven't really operated in a couple of years, you know. And flipping over to the defense, you know, the Bengals were 4-4 games where they scored at least 28 points. They averaged 27.76 points per game, right? So going 4-4 where you score 28 points per game, that's an indictment on your defense, because there are teams that don't even average 23 points per game and they go 11-6 or 12-5, right?
You should be like 6-2 minimum in a stretch like that.
Exactly. Like, yeah, they had a couple shootouts, well, like with the Ravens specifically, but like to have a shootout every game and say, hey, Joe Burrow, can you throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns and we might give you a chance to win? Like, that's just blasphemous for football, right? Like, as a defensive guy, that pisses me off. So just to kind of give some highlights on what made this defense as bad as they were. They were 6th highest in EPA per play allowed and 5th highest in EPA per rush allowed. They were really bad on defense, especially against the run. So teams milk the clock and force Joe Burrow to have the ball less than what he normally does. And with that, they allowed the 2nd highest rush success rate in the NFL. If we look at those last 5 weeks of the season, though, this defense looked night and day. Like, they figured it out somehow in the last 5 weeks when they went 5-0. They had the 7th lowest EPA per play allowed and the 5th lowest EPA per dropback allowed. And they went from the 2nd worst rush defense to middle of the road at 17th. Like, something changed in this defense, and they didn't really change anything. Like, I think they just kind of figured out how to play together. I think Trey Hendrickson was getting some good matchups that Trey Hendrickson's a great rusher, and he has been for the past 3 years. But I think at the end of last year, he really came unglued because they were trying to make a push. And so he was just playing out of his mind. And I think that kind of helped all that come together. Logan Wilson stopped being a pumpkin in coverage, which was nice. But other than that, they didn't really change how their play calling was. They ran a lot of what we call fire zone, is basically a 5-man or 6-man blitz, and you put people in zone behind it. When we talk about fire zone coverages, right, there's a couple different ways. So there's fire zone 3, which is 3 high and 3 middle. And then there's fire zone 2, which is 2 safeties over the top or 2 defenders over the top and 4 underneath. Those are the most common fire zone calls. The Bengals ran fire zone 4, where they put 4 defenders over the top, and then based on the offensive strength and leverage, they would move the 2 guys underneath and be like, okay, find the pockets, and when you find them, we're bringing our guys downhill to stop it. And I think they ran that more in those 5 games, and that kind of threw a curveball at some of these teams. And they were just good at that. Like, it was just really cool to see that shift in play calling. Like, Lou and Anarumo does that a lot compared to other guys in the league, like Brian Flores level type blitz and fire zone blitzes. But he ran that 4-shell fire zone more than anyone else, especially in those last 5 weeks. And I think that's kind of what unlocked it. Unfortunately for the Bengals, they're losing a lot of solid foundational defensive pieces. Sam Hubbard, who was the Robin to Trey's Batman, retired. So that's not that he was a good edge. He was above average, but still like a NFL starting edge. He's gone. Jermaine Pratt, who's been in that linebacker core for several years, he's gone, and he played a shit ton of snaps for them. Mike Hilton, who's a really good slot corner, he's gone. He's in Miami. Akeem Davis-Gaither was kind of a zone nickel dime linebacker that they like to put in. He's gone. Von Bell, who was in the back end of that safety group, he's gone. And obviously Lou, as DC, is gone. And Lou's like, I know the defense was bad, but that was not on Lou. Like, Lou was a good defensive coordinator in this league. It's just he didn't have the pieces. And that's a lot of what's been happening with this front office and Joe Burrow advocating for his guys, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you're building a team. You're not building an offense. Like, the past 2 receiver classes have been absolutely loaded. You could have found someone to replace T. Higgins and then used the money from T. Higgins and added 4 or 5 more defensive pieces and probably would have signed Trey Hendrickson to a massive contract. And this defense is probably middle of the pack, which is all Joe Burrow needs. But Joe Burrow likes his guys, which there's no problem with that in a vacuum. But when it comes to contract negotiations and you have a poor cash flow team like the Bengals, because their owner is one of the poorest in the NFL, it's tough to have everything you want like some of these other players are having happen for them.
Absolutely. For you, year 6 for Joe Burrow, right? Last season, statistically, probably his best, right? Yeah. He was 82 yards short of 5,000. You talk about Joe Burrow liking to play with his guys. It's kind of hard. I think most teams would like to play with guys that the quarterback can win with rather than guys that the quarterback likes, although that's important. For you, is there anything that you want to see Joe Burrow work on this season?
I think the biggest thing for him is going to be you advocated for these guys. Like we know Jamar Chase is probably going to lead the NFL in receiving or at least be top 3. Like, utilize T. Higgins a lot. Utilize Mike Gesicki a lot. Like, use Chase Brown out of the backfield a lot. Like, you better lead the league in passing again. Like, you better have a historic year as far as quarterback play is concerned. If you do all this advocating and all this pushing, you better do something with it. So it's not so much what Joe Burrow has to do differently. It's what he has to do. Like, you can't say, oh, I want this guy. I want this guy. Like, I don't care about my offensive line. I'm going to mitigate it and then not foot the bill, which he's foot the bill his entire career since he's been in Cincinnati and has kind of shushed the haters up from the pre-LSU days, right? Like, he's proven he's a top 5 quarterback in this league. Firmly, he's number 4 for me, and he's number 4 for a lot of people. He's a damn good quarterback. But if you're doing all this advocating, at some point the defensive struggles and the offensive line struggles can't matter if you're going to do this much pushing for your guys. So, and not that he complains about it, because he doesn't, but when you look at a game like we saw with the Commanders where he's trying to scramble around in a preseason game and make something happen, you can't be doing that if you want to stay healthy and you want to give your guys a chance. You have to make smart, sound decision-making. And I feel like he's going to try to play hero ball because that's what he had to do last year. And we might see a drop-off in his production from a box score statistical standpoint. And even in his play, like, when you feel like you have to play hero ball, no quarterback plays better than they do when they don't feel like they have to play hero ball.
Absolutely. And let's get into the dark horse offensive tackle, Amarius Mims. Mm-hmm. What do you like out of this guy? And how do you feel like he's one of the best guys to be protecting a guy like Joe Burrow, even when he has to play hero ball?
Yeah, this guy's an athletic freak. He's over 6'5", over 340 pounds, but moves like he's 300. Really good feet, really strong hands, and looks fit for his size. I just like him as a developmental piece. I think he did better down the stretch of last season, especially when we talk about pass pro. He struggled most of his rookie year. He'd been battling injuries. That's the most snap he's played in any season of his football career. I think he played 800 total snaps in 3 years of college. Like, that sucks, but he just wasn't healthy. Got healthy last year and played a full season against some of the best edge rushers in the NFL. I mean, the AFC North is loaded with them. Myles Garrett, TJ Watt. You have the Ravens tandem of constantly rotating guys. Like, that's tough. And then you look at the rest of their schedule, like, played against a lot of good edge rushers. But during the last third of the season, he improved. He allowed just 7 pressures from week 13 to week 17. So a 5-game span. He didn't play week 18. And a 4.17 pressure rate allowed. That's pretty decent for an offensive tackle. And he ranked 16th out of 58 offensive tackles in true pass block grade in that same span at 74.8. So, again, we have a small sample size to work with, but I like the athleticism. I like the build. Now that he's got some snaps under his belt, I think we're going to see a good year 2 from him. And that's why he's my dark horse, because everyone's kind of writing off the Bengals O-line. He's someone who I think is going to be a bright spot and is going to be an anchor on that offensive line for the next several years.
Finally, the big question for the Bengals. If the defense continues to struggle, can enough hero ball and enough, excellent play from the offense be enough to keep the Bengals and put them back in the playoffs and maybe be better than 9-8?
I don't think it can, because we saw Joe Burrow at his best, especially in those last 5 weeks, and that still wasn't enough. And it's just how loaded the AFC is. And it's if this defense plays the exact same as it did this year as it did last year, I don't know what more Joe Burrow can do to elevate. Like, he has to play perfect. And sorry, no quarterback is playing perfect. The closest we saw was Lamar Jackson last year, right? Like, and Aaron Rodgers probably in 2014, right? Like, one of the most efficient quarterback seasons we've ever seen. And even he wasn't perfect, right? And not that Joe Burrow can't play at that level. He has not played at a super efficient, perfect accuracy level like those two did in those 2 seasons, right? So that's what it's going to have to take. I don't know if he has that in his arsenal. Like, he's a very good tight window thrower, can put the ball all over the field, but he will put the ball in harm's way more than all the other superstar stud quarterbacks that we have in the league and have had in the league, like over the past 10 years, right? So to put it bluntly, no, this defense has to step up, because this offense is going to regress. Like, that was a really, really damn good offense last year, and they're losing some star power in some positions, even on the offensive side. So it's kind of wait and see, but I would say no from outside looking into the season.
Yeah, it's going to be a stressful time for Bengals fans when their team does not have the ball. Mm-hmm. And let's get into the final team of the division. Team that struggled our whole lives, ever-growing list of quarterbacks. Once again, an exciting draft for the Cleveland Browns, but I think we're all ready to be a little bit skeptical on how well that draft is going to help them this season. 1 year removed from the playoffs, how would you describe the Cleveland Browns in 2024?
They were the worst team last year. Like, and I know people will say the Titans were the worst team, and like there's some merit there, but like in terms of where the Browns were in 2023 and what they became, this is just so bad. Like, and it starts top down. Just the management, the ownership, it's just been bad. And it all started with the Deshaun Watson trade. Like, Baker Mayfield, like, he obviously wasn't as good as he is now, but they gave up on him, and he was the first quarterback to bring you to the playoffs in forever, or ever since you moved back to Cleveland and you had the expansion team from the Ravens, right? Like, you were the laughing stock of the NFL, and now you have a guy with swagger, with moxie, has a piss missile for an arm, and you trade him away for a quarterback who hadn't played in over 700 days and had allegations and had controversy, and Deshaun Watson in 2019 was an awesome quarterback, or 2020, whatever year it was he went off, like was a damn good quarterback. He's not that anymore, and the injuries have shown that, right? But getting into the Browns of 2024, they were just piss poor, and it starts with the offense, right? Like this was a good offense in 2023. They had the lowest DPA per play, lowest DPA per drop back, 6th lowest DPA per rush, and then in terms of success rate, lowest overall, lowest per drop back, and 3rd lowest rush success in the NFL. And what is changing into this year? I'm not really sure. I mean, the quarterback room has a ton of question marks. Like Joe Flacco is the starter, but how long are they going to let that last with Dylan Gabriel, Shadur Sanders, Kenny Pickett, and even Deshaun Watson, if he comes back from injury quick enough, like maybe you want to throw him in there because you're already paying him a fuck ton of money. That was stupid to begin with. So you have to do sunk cost fallacy. Well, we're paying him this much, we might as well play him. Like we might see 5 quarterbacks play for the Browns if Deshaun Watson comes back from this injury sooner than expected, which is just batshit crazy to even think about. If you told me at the end of that 2023 season that the 2020, was it 22 or 23? 22 season after the Browns made the playoffs with Baker Mayfield, and you told me that, yeah, they're going to have a shuffle of 5 quarterbacks and be one of the worst offenses in 2024, I would have looked at you like you had 5 freaking heads, because I would have been like, there's no way. Like, this team is projecting this well, and they turn it to this. Browns are going to Browns. Like, that's just what it is, you know? And the other question marks come up in this rushing attack, right? Like, Quinshon Judkins, who's a good player, hasn't been in training camp, was dealing with a legal issue. That seems to be cleared up and out of the way. Still some question marks around that, but he's barely been around for training camp. He still doesn't have his contract signed. Like, we thought that as soon as the allegations were dropped and the charges were dropped that a contract would get signed. I think it's been 4 days. There's still nothing. So, like, now you're going to go through this whole negotiation thing when you haven't been around and you're trying to get on the field. Like, we may not see him until week 4. There's a real possibility of that. And now you have to go with Jerome Ford and another rookie, Dylan Sampson. And then the offensive line itself, like, they are one injury away from absolutely crumbling, because there's a lot of guys on this offensive line that I like Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, DeJuan Jones is solid. Not solid, but, like, I think he's getting better and better. But, like, if one of those guys goes down, this whole offensive line is going to crumble, I think. And it's one of the oldest offensive lines in the league. It's one of the most injury-prone offensive lines in the league. Like, everything has to go right just for this offense to be average. Like, you do not want to be in that situation, and somehow the Browns are in that spot going into 2025.
Absolutely. For you, I mean, where could you find a bright spot on this roster before maybe even getting into your dark horse? Like, is there anything that anybody that you're looking forward to on this team?
I mean, Myles Garrett is obviously one of those guys that we're looking forward to. Carson Schwessinger, I probably got the name wrong, the linebacker from UCLA. He's going to come in. He's going to be the starting Mike right away. Like, I think he's going to be a really solid player. Denzel Ward is up there. Maybe Greg Newsome bounces back and doesn't get toasted like he did last year. Like, I think he could be solid. Another second-round guy with some from Ohio State who had some issues last year, Michael Hall, was one of my favorite DTs in that class last year. I think he's bound for a big year. This defense in 2023 was one of the best, and then in 2024 was not good. Like, just straight up, and it was mainly this pass defense outside of Myles Garrett, right? Like, I just want to see this defense play as a cohesive unit and not just fall to superstars playing on their own. Because, like, I don't think Myles Garrett does that, but, like, I think there's a real point to be made that, like, if he's the only one making plays for you and the rest of the defense sucks, is as a leader and as one of the highest paid defensive players in this league, what can you do to help this defense out and play more together and more whole? And that sounds cliche and it sounds stupid, but there's a reality to that where, yeah, he can't play all 11 positions on the field, but he can, like, look at Max Crosby in in Las Vegas. Like, that defense has not really been good during his time there outside of the back half of 2023, right? Like, they have not been good, but they've been better because he's not taking these stupid, and I'm not saying Myles Garrett is doing this, but like Max Crosby is a super sound run defender, and he sets the tone up front for this run defense. Myles Garrett is a damn good pass rusher. He's one of the best in the NFL, if not the best. Like, he might be the best defensive player in the NFL, period. And that's great that you can win in pass rush because that's most of the game. But on those gritty early downs, can you stuff the run? And he's a very, very good run defender. I wouldn't say he's top 5 in terms of the edge position. I think Max Crosby's at the top of that. But can you set the tone on the gritty downs that sets the tone for this defense? And I wonder if in this season, if he chooses to do that, will this defense come back into the fold and will it come back to fruition? Like, again, sounds cliche and sounds stupid because he's one guy out of 11. He does his 111th and he does it at a really, really, really high level. But there is a reality that you have a inherent responsibility to the rest of your defense and the rest of your team to play within the structure and play within the system so everyone else can find their spot and not have to do extra, because Myles Garrett can do extra and he's awesome at doing it, but he doesn't have to do it as often. Like, we know how damn good he is. Play, like, just like we said, it's kind of a theme this episode, like, just like Lamar, just like Joe, just like the Steelers defense, play within your means and play your type of game. Don't try to be a hero. Just play your game. And when Myles Garrett does that, he's one of the best players in the NFL.
Absolutely. And then before we get into the dark horse and the big question, I mean, I do kind of want to ask about Shedeur a little bit. Obviously, he's not, 100% right now. But, with Joe Flacco currently the starter as we kind of move into the season, but do we feel like we'll see any Shedeur later this season? And is it even worth bringing him on? Like, obviously you want a young quarterback to get snaps, and it's not I'm not saying that as a reflection of whether or not I want to see him play, but for a team like this, like, is there going to be any value for him to kind of get some snaps, later on in the season potentially?
I think it will, because when you look at quarterbacks who have played really well, like, later in their careers, like, obviously Pat Mahomes is the, like, epitome of that. Like sit him almost his entire rookie year, and now you have one of the best quarterbacks of all time, right? Like, that's
Tom Brady too. Like,
Tom Brady's another guy. He didn't play at all his rookie year, and he wasn't even a first round pick. Like, he was an afterthought almost on this team, right? Like, there was probably 99% of the other realities of the NFL. Tom Brady never becomes Tom Brady, but they got 4 quarterbacks for some reason, right? Like, that wouldn't even happen today, right? Like, so, but then very rarely does throwing someone to the fire end up working out for the team. We just saw that with Anthony Richardson. Not that Kyler Murray hasn't worked out. Like, Kyler Murray was very much an NFL ready quarterback, but he has not been what we thought he was going to be. Joe Burrow obviously had the injury early on, but like, even he didn't have a good rookie year. Justin Herbert probably would have been better than he is if he didn't get thrown to the fire in week 2 and kind of have to play. And he still had a really damn good rookie year, right? But very rarely does throwing your rookie out there early on pan out for a lot of quarterbacks. And I think Josh Allen is kind of that outlier in this situation. I think Jaden Daniels was NFL ready. Like, and I brought this up in the NFC East episode. I just had a bad evaluation on him. Shedeur Sanders is not NFL ready. Like, he's in that tier of project quarterbacks. And I like Shedeur. Like, I don't like some of the stuff he says to the media and, like, throwing his players under the bus and how he reacts to certain guys. But from what I've been hearing behind closed doors, like, he listens well. He's very coachable. Like, he's a down to earth dude. Like, he's an entertainer. He's got that superstar mentality, right? So, like, you want to root for him just to prove everyone wrong, But there was nothing he did at Colorado, and I think this might be more the system than Shedeur himself, but that was the complete opposite of the NFL system that he ran at Colorado. Like, lots of shotgun, lots of spread, lots of RPO, lots of screens. Like, you don't see that in the NFL. So I think his job is sit behind Joe Flacco as long as you can. And when you get your chance, just play simple, fundamental football. Don't make the playbook super expansive. You got to shrink the playbook to give him only a couple things to focus on. And just let him work through his progression, work through his reads. Don't try to do anything extravagant like we saw him do in week 1 of the preseason. And yeah, it's preseason, but when people say, oh, Shedeur is this, he's a great athlete, he couldn't evade a defensive tackle on half the pressures. Like, and it's an NFL defensive lineman, but like half the quarterbacks in the league can evade a defensive tackle. Shedeur can't. Like, it's just how it is. He's a fine athlete. He's not this great athlete that he's made out to be, but like he needs to play within his means, and he needs to play within the system. He can't do this hero ball shit that we saw him try to do. And yeah, like when he played within the structure, like that designed rollout touchdown to the back left corner of the end zone where he funneled it through 3 defenders, I'm like, that's an NFL throw. That's an NFL quarterback. Like, that's awesome. But half the time, he's not doing that. And that's where I kind of have my hangups. So his job is going to be to learn from Joe Flacco, play within structure, and use whatever time he has in game to do what Joe Flacco does. Joe Flacco is not going to do these out-of-pocket extravagant plays. He's going to sit in the pocket and throw a ball right at your face and say, try to pick it off, because I'm zipping it right by you before you get a chance to realize I threw it. That's who Joe Flacco is. If Shedeur can do that, sky's the limit for this kid going into year 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And, those awesome throws that he made, those NFL caliber throws are still NFL caliber in the NFL, but they're a lot less successful against the Pittsburgh Steelers than they are against like Colorado State and like North Dakota State, 2 great programs, especially North Dakota State. But you know what I mean? It's just like, that's just how it is. Like your competition's going to get better. Let's talk on the defensive side with your dark horse, Grant Delpit. What do you like out of him?
I think he's a good safety. I think he got better every year in the NFL. He did take a little bit of a step back last year and had his worst year in coverage on paper. 123.5 pass rating allowed is abysmal. And it was his first year allowing over 100 passer rating, and just the second year of his career allowing over a 79 passer rating. So he has a really good track record of being good in coverage. That didn't happen last year, and I think that's because they, like Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome, were just dog water, and so he felt like he might have had to do their job a little bit and cheat his zone down, and he got exposed over the top a bunch. He allowed 3 TDs, which doubled his career total. The 3 years leading into this year, he allowed 3 TDs total. This year alone, he allowed 3, right? So doubled his total. And this was also the most targets he's ever seen, the most receptions he's allowed, and the most yards he's allowed in his career up to this point. So he had a rough year. Guys can have rough years. He's still a good safety. I think he's going to rebound this year. And what I think matters is he still improved in run defense, which is where he used to struggle. This is the first year he had less than 10% of his tackles missed. He had a nearly 14-point jump in his run defense grade and a nearly 20-point jump in his tackling grade. If he was around the same in run defense and had that drop-off in coverage, I would feel a lot differently. But he improved in areas where he was lacking. So now he just needs to get back to what he was doing before. And we have a complete safety in 2025 if he elevates his coverage play to what it was and continues to improve his run defense and tackling. Like, you can't ask for more than that in terms of a safety. That's why he's my dark horse. I think a lot of people wrote him off because he was really good on that LSU team, had an injury. I think he fell to the second round, maybe even the third in that 2019 draft. And he's just gotten better and better every year and just took a step back last year. Like, I think that projection is going to keep moving its way up. And I think getting rid of Martin Emerson and filling in a couple new guys in the secondary is going to help him play his own game and just trust, like, hey, they brought in these news guys for a reason. Let me just go back to what I do well. And we're going to see. He might have a career year. He might blossom. Like, that's what I hope for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big question for the Cleveland Browns, from a analysis standpoint, their schedule is kind of perfect because their bye is in week 9. So they got 8 games, and then they head into the bye. And then from weeks 10 to 18, it's just, final mad dash to finish out the season. For you, based on how we've talked about in prep, like, you might not even think he'll make it this far, but say we get into the bye and Kevin Stefanski is still the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Coming out of the bye in week 10, will he be leading the team against the New York Jets?
It depends. The problem is, holy hell, their schedule sucks the first half of the year, right? Like, I'll not quickly, but just to go through these. They play the Bengals week 1, Ravens week 2, and going forward, the Packers, the Lions, the Vikings, the Steelers, who we'll see, the Dolphins, who will have their moments, and then the Patriots before their bye week? No, excuse me. Yeah. Patriots before their bye week, right? And the Patriots are looking much better on offense, at least on paper, right? So out of your first 8 games, you're playing 6 teams with a high-end offense. And of those 6 teams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially 6 have a damn good defense to go along with it. So if you start 2-6, see you later, Kevin Stefanski. But if he can somehow go 3-5 and steal a win against, the Bengals in September always suck. So maybe he steals a win against the Bengals. I think they beat the Dolphins. Maybe they beat the Patriots and start 3-5. Maybe Kevin Stefanski stays around for a while because then they have the Jets. Then they have the Ravens again. But then they play the Raiders, whose defense is not looking that good. 49ers, who are not rebuilding, but they have a lot of young pieces. The Titans, who are absolutely rebuilding. The Bears, who I think are going to be good, are kind of a wild card because we got to see how this offense pans out. And then they finish with the Bills, Steelers, and Bengals, right? Like, we'll see how it goes by the bye week. I think if they're 2-6 and worse, I think Kevin Stefanski's gone. Like, it's been long enough. You went 3-14 the year before. Like, push comes to shove, something's got to give, right? But if he's 3-5 or 4-4, I think he stays on until the end of the season. And if they don't make playoffs, which I don't think they're going to sniff it, I think he's gone. I think he's just kind of run a course at this point. You need some new blood. Especially if you want to rock with Shedeur going into year 2, like, pair him up with a new coach. Like, pair him up with someone who's never been a head coach before. Like, just see what happens. Like, get a young, sharp, offensive mind to come in and say, let me build this kid into something great. Let me build a culture here, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And side tangent, sorry about this, but I noticed when we're looking at the Brown schedule that they're playing the Vikings week 5 at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. Earlier in the show, we talked about the Steelers playing the Vikings week 4 in Ireland. That sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks for the Vikings. I'm surprised we didn't talk about this in the NFC North show, which you should check out, by the way. But, man, that sucks.
Yeah, tough.
Going back to last episode, maybe bring up another keyword. Capitalism. Kind of sucks. Anyway,
NFL loves money. What can we say?
Football, baby. Anyway, going to be very interesting. Kind of a watershed year for a lot of the teams in this division. For many different ways. I feel like Steelers, we definitely talked about it. The Browns, we definitely talked about it. But even with the Bengals and the Ravens, like, we kind of laid the seeds for it. Like, there's a lot of big questions for these teams in their current stages of development and what they're currently trying to run. So a very interesting division, a lot of questions, and a lot more that we'll probably cover later on in our next set of previews. This has been the AFC North preview. So now we have covered half the NFL. So if you want to keep checking out the other division previews that we've done so far, make sure you head to houseenterprise.com. Follow all the socials that you see down below for all the updates on football, basketball, everything that our great House Enterprise crew is covering. If you want to see specific breakdowns from these podcasts of the teams that we've already covered, head to our House Enterprise YouTube channel, where we've got them all broken up into, bite-sized videos in a full-on playlist that you can kind of catch up on throughout the last couple days of this offseason. And Jordan, when we come back to you guys next time, we're going to be talking about the NFC South. I know we've got a lot of great stuff coming up. We've got a couple more people that we can bring on for these last couple divisions. I know Ohm Brown's really excited to come on for the AFC South, so you don't want to miss that. But until then, For Jordan Laube, I'm Sam Basel. This has been the Basel Pod. Head to House Enterprise for more. But until then, we'll see you guys next time.